You're live. Get going.
So hi everyone. Thank you all for coming, for being here. I know there's a lot going on, and I know there's a lot of things in the community right now that a lot of our community members are dealing with, which is why there's not as many people as we would have hoped. But we really appreciate all of you being here. We do have online streaming also, so there are some people streaming online. I'm just gonna jump pretty quick to it. My name is Daly. I am the Community Outreach and Palestine Education Director here at PAC. I'm really excited to be hosting this event, and that PAC is having this event, which we, on the flyer, we really called it How to Advocate for Palestine in the US. And that's something that, if you're here, you probably know that is sometimes difficult for a lot of different reasons: social, political, economic, family, personal. And so we are very lucky to have some of our friends from the US Campaign for Palestinian Rights here who do awesome work and can help us kind of navigate that and help answer any questions or concerns you might be feeling or having doing that. And so it's my pleasure to introduce both Ahmad Abuznaid and Mike Daly. I'm just going to read just some quick bios and then I'm going to hand it off to them. So Ahmad Abuznaid is the Executive Director of the US Campaign for Palestinian Rights and a friend of PAC, a friendly face of PAC. Prior to joining USCPR, Ahmad co-founded the Florida-based Dream Defenders after the killing of Trayvon Martin, serving as Legal and Policy Director and COO during his time there. Ahmad went on to lead the National Network for Arab American Communities as the Executive Director from 2017 to 2019. And then also Mike Daly is joining us. He is USCPR's Development Director. Prior to joining USCPR, Mike worked at Interfaith Peace Builders, now Eyewitness Palestine, who's awesome, for more than a decade. Most recently serving as IFPP's Managing Director, Mike helped send more than 1,000 people on educational delegations to Palestine and grew IFPP's programming and revenue. Mike has also worked as a public relations consultant with UNDP in Ramallah, studied Arabic in Damascus as a Fulbright scholar, and completed a year of intensive Arabic at the American University in Cairo. Mike has led 5 IFPB delegations and presented at numerous conferences and workshops. We're very excited to have both of you here. Thank you all. If you can just help me welcome them.
Thank you so much, Abir, and thank you all for being here. I have to say, both organizationally and personally, I'm very happy to be here. At USCPR, we've watched PAC grow over the years and see you as a great partner in the work, and are so happy to see everything you've built here. And personally, about 2 years ago, I moved to New Jersey from New York City. So we live about 20 minutes south of here. I've stayed pretty much at home during the pandemic, but I've always wanted to make it up to PAC. So this is my first time here, and I'm very grateful to be here and hope many more connections in the years to come. And you all are making history here. When I told my daughter, my 8-year-old, today that I wasn't going to be there for bedtime and I wasn't going to be there for dinner, she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm going to talk about Palestine." She said, "Cool, Dad, that's awesome." We told her something about Palestine. She's like, "Where are you going?" I said, "Patterson." And she said, "That's where they have Palestine Way, right?" So for a little 8-year-old, a little bit south of here, your story is known, and she's very proud of Palestine Way. So wanted to start with that. What I'm going to do tonight, I'm going to tell you kind of what we're going to do for the agenda. I'm going to start, we're going to turn over to Ahmed, and then open up for discussion. As Abir said, we'd love to get your comments and feedback and think about how we build this movement stronger together. And I'm going to start with kind of a brief presentation on USCPR, on our work, and then I'll segue to Ahmed. So this is USCPR's mission and vision. We were founded about 20 years ago. We just commemorated our 20th anniversary last fall. Edward Said, Nadia Hijab, other activists and scholars came together in New York City about 20 years ago to found an organization that would be a node for the movement, that could sort of help mobilize. At that point, it was the mobilize action to advance Palestinian rights. That was the height of the Second Intifada, 2021, 2022. And so we grew from those roots in that time. We were originally called US Campaign to End the Israeli Occupation. You may have heard us under that name. In 2016, we changed to the US Campaign for Palestinian Rights, to be affirming for something, and also to make it super clear that we're doing more than just ending the occupation. We have bigger goals than that. I want to tell you about some of the streams of our work, because I think that will flow into what Ahmed's going to talk about in terms of building our movement. One of the things that we've done since our founding has been help mobilize the movement. We started as a formal coalition. We've now grown into a bigger, wider network. and we have brought people together in various ways. Let me give you a few examples. We bring national partners like folks on the screen, and we're missing some, together every year for a planning convening that used to always happen in person. During COVID, we've gone virtual, of course. But these are some of the biggest national groups working on Palestine, and we don't want to recreate the wheel. We want to amplify each other's efforts. We want to plan ahead. And so Uscpr takes this space where we can bring these folks together and say, what are you planning this year? What are you going to be doing on Capitol Hill? You know, they're experts in media, obviously. What do you guys think about media campaigns? Can we workshop stuff with you? So that's an example of one of the roles we play in terms of mobilizing the movement, bringing people together. Another example, we've hosted 16 national conferences to date, where we've got hundreds of people together in different cities around the US. Lots of energy, lots of excitement, lots of learning that happen at those. The other bigger pieces of work that we do are organize, right? We lead campaigns, and there are two main tracks for that. Probably not going to be super surprising to you all, but one of them is Boycott and Divestment, and the other is the Sanctions. So we're covering BDS, and Sanctions, that's our engagement with elected officials. Let me walk you through a couple things. Again, I imagine many of you know this in the audience, but this is a little bit older slide. Apologies for that. But as of 2019, we had 250 BDS wins in the US. The US campaign did not work on all of those. But again, in that central convening role, we were critical in terms of supporting some of those efforts, lifting up those efforts, and leading some of those. So that's a big win. The corporate divestments that kind of swept about 5 years ago, we had a bunch of big wins in a row, SodaStream, Veolia, Ahmad. Those were campaigns that Uscpr was highly active in and were big moments in the growth of our movement, hugely important. And church divestments too, right? So we've worked a lot on these, sharing lessons from the 9 mainline Protestants that have divested, and trying to keep building that movement. It's led to great wins for our movement. The other big piece of work that we do, and that we have a lot of experience in, is work on Capitol Hill with elected officials. Here are some photos from some of our meetings that we had. Again, these are pre-COVID photos. But we're trying to channel our grassroots power. We have over 200,000 supporters, grassroots supporters around the US, and we have a volunteer network in over 100 congressional districts. So we're trying to leverage that grassroots power, the energy on the ground in places like New Jersey, at PAC, into getting to know staffers, into talking with congressional offices. And if you probably recognize some of the folks in these photos, but we're also bringing different organizations together, from Abdallah in Palestine. Jewish Voice for Peace here is in one of our meetings, our Daly Justice Project, Ashabaka meeting with Betty McCollum. So we're bringing folks together to Capitol Hill to leverage our power, and that leads to big wins. And before I get to Ahmad, I just want to tell you, we were talking before with Diab about how important hope is, how important victories are. And so it's been a tough couple of weeks. I know it's also been, last year was tough with the invasion of Gaza, with the attacks on Gaza. And so even last year, in a year that was a pretty tough year for Palestinian rights, we had some pretty big accomplishments, achievements. And by we, I mean the movement. But in March, we had over 100 progressive orgs sign a letter saying we need to end medical apartheid. This was about Israel. It's not giving vaccines, COVID vaccines in the West Bank. And these were groups that were far beyond the choir. These were not just Palestinian rights groups. We've been working with environmental justice groups, immigration rights groups, racial justice groups in the US, and they're signing on more and more to support Palestinian rights, which is really exciting, excuse me. Another thing that for us was a relief, but I think also for the greater movement was a good sign. You know, lawfare is a huge challenge we're facing right now. And US campaign had been facing a lawsuit for 2 years. The Jewish National Fund had filed this kind of frivolous lawsuit, lots of allegations in it. And in April of last year, a federal US judge dismissed that case against us. A huge win, a huge relief. And we hope, will help not have this be a silencing, not let the JNF win, not let those lawfare proponents win, since the judge sided with us and said this is completely frivolous, dismissed the lawsuit. In May, when there was a lot of pressure, as you know, on Sheikh Jarrah, when Gaza was being outright attacked, we sent over 200,000 letters to Congress asking for Israeli sanctions. That was one of the bigger actions we've ever done. Lots of people writing into Congress. Obviously, we aren't to sanctions yet, but more and more representatives were hearing from their constituents. One that I don't know, I'm actually curious. This one I don't think was as reported as well, but I think it's a huge win. There's this sort of prestigious fellowship with the ADL, the so-called Anti-Defamation League, and the Aspen Institute. They have a fellowship that they sort of work on together. And 5 fellows in that program, prestigious fellowship, publicly and several others privately resigned, and specifically said we're resigning because of the ADL's role and the way that ADL has historically silenced, attacked Palestinian voices. So that was a huge win. Probably heard about the Ben & Jerry's win. That was another exciting one that we had been working on for over a decade. There was a group in Vermont, a small local group that was a member of the US campaign that had led that work for decades. We had tried to amplify it. There were like these Ben & Jerry's ice cream days, free ice cream days. We'd go and put postcards and pamphlet and stuff. And so after more than a decade of work to win and they actually haven't stopped selling in settlements yet. I think it's next year, but they've committed to stop selling to settlements very, very soon. So that was a huge win. And the last one is just something I wanted to share with you all that we're doing going forward. I mean, obviously the next generation, the youth, we're trying to invest in them very much. And so we have this Palestinian Youth Advocacy Network of fellows. We've had 16 fellows to date. We're in over 10 cities. There's actually a fellow here at PAC, which is very exciting that we're working with. And so that has been a big new program for us that we've invested a lot of time and energy in. That is a quick look at what, this is Ahmad. So that's a quick look at what USCPR has done, some of the contributions we've made to the movement. I hope that sets up Ahmad's remarks, and I'll give it to him.
All right, thank you, Mike. Give Mike a round of applause. Thank you, Mike. So it's interesting speaking to you all about this subject, advocating for Palestine in the US, because I consider PAC and the PAC community to be experts at advocating for Palestine. This isn't something that one particular organization or one particular institution has owned. This is a movement-wide celebration of advocacy skills and development, and so you all are a testament to what we can achieve. I wanted to start off by naming our theory of change. This is really important for us because even though many of us are Palestinian in the room, we also have the duality of the role to play as American citizens, as those living within America, maybe on the path to citizenship, right? And this is important to acknowledge because our tax dollars are funding the oppression of our people. And of course, as Palestinians, we have a role in fighting back against that oppression. But as Americans, the single most impactful thing that we can contribute to our Palestinian comrades, our family members, our friends on the ground, is to simply pull away the piggy bank, right? If we eliminate the US qualitative support of the military edge of the Israelis, if we eliminate sending our tax dollars to the Israeli military when Americans are struggling to put food on the table, then not only do we empower Americans to live a better life and to, see the society that we wish to see here, but we're going to make sure it's much easier on our family members back home to advocate and achieve liberation. The Palestinian people are going to free themselves, but the biggest thing that we can do is, again, pull that piggy bank back, make sure they don't have US-made weaponry, make sure they don't have that cutting-edge qualitative military edge over the Palestinian resistance. So that's our theory of change. And how do we get there? I thought this graphic was interesting because grassroots advocacy and campaigns is at the bottom. And I don't think that is actually a testament to the importance or the contribution. It's actually, for me, suggesting that that's the base, right? Without the grassroots, none of this other stuff is possible. So without a PAC, having a rally, without Palestinian Youth Movement holding rallies, without US Campaign and Halal Justice Project and American Muslims for Palestine holding these rallies, there's no grassroots advocacy and support at the baseline level. And that's important because these three spheres that are above all depend on that baseline of grassroots advocacy and campaigns. And so what we want to do is allow for leveraging of local wins, local work, local campaigns, local organizing to achieve policy change, shifting discourse within the political space. A primary facet of our ability to advocate for Palestine in the US is educating for impact. we have to be organized, we have to be a part of an organization, we have to have a theory of change, which I was just alluding to, but we also have to be educated. This isn't just for non-Palestinians or non-Arabs or non-Muslims, this is for Palestinians as well. Not all of us come out of, the Edward Said, scholarly educational system. Many of us have to go search and look for the facts and the data and the statistics. And so US Campaign's website, we have, some of these resources listed. I'll name a couple of them. The BDS toolkit is something that's been really impactful for people. We have a speakers and trainers list. So for folks looking to identify what speakers can be pivotal on this certain subject related to Palestine, we have that information readily available. But the resource that I actually want to spend a bit of time talking about is the map of military aid to Israel. So if you visit the US Campaign website right now, you can actually type in either via your city name, the state, or your zip code, and you can find out the amount of federal tax dollars that are being sucked out of your community and going directly to the Israeli military. This is important to know, not so you can call your local mayor, because it's not your local mayor's budget. And I had a couple mayors from Dearborn get upset with me because they were getting all sorts of calls. You should have that sort of passion and action immediately after you find out how much of your tax dollars are going to Israel. But what we did was we updated our tool on the website. So right below the map where you can find out, how much of your federal tax dollars are going to Israel, there's also a call to action where you can contact your member of Congress, because that's who we need to be putting the pressure on, right? That's who's representing us at the federal level and earmarking those dollars for Israeli apartheid. So we're really proud of that map. It really shows every American that there's a lot of tax dollars that should be kept at home. You all provide social services at PAC, so you know that there's a lot of money that's being wasted by our federal government when it could be utilized right here at home. And so shout out to PAC again for stepping up and being the sort of institution we can be proud of. I know that in the moment of the pandemic, ideally we would have looked to our federal government and our state governments and our local governments to have all the solutions, but sometimes it's community organizations like PAC that are going to step up and contribute. So this tool will help you realize how much federal aid we could be utilizing at home as opposed to sent to the Israeli military. We have a progressive vision of justice for all. This is really, again, a part of that divest to invest framework I was just referencing. Really has a lot to do with not only just the use of our tax dollars, but what type of ideals, what type of values, what type of vision do we have, not just for Palestine, but for here, right? Most of us are living here with families and growing children and raising children. And so, it isn't just about what happens in Palestine for us. This has also been home to so many of us. This has been, the place that we started to maybe get a little bit of taste of that freedom we'd love to see back home in Palestine. So, our vision of justice for all is truly one that we believe not only is the righteous path for Palestinian freedom, but also for many of our allies and our partners in the cross movement space in the United States. It's imperative that we advocate for justice for all. And so this is just a brief example of that. You all may know the name Angela Davis, one of the historic figures in the Black radical tradition and the Black freedom movement in the US. We've done a lot of work with Angela Davis, and in this quote here, I just wanted to share from her. She says, "When we are engaged in the struggle against racist violence, we can't forget the connections with Palestine. In many ways, we have to engage in an exercise of intersectionality, of always foregrounding those connections so that people remember that nothing happens in isolation." Now, why this is especially important for Angela Davis to be sharing with us, and why we continue to look for Angela Davis as a model within the movement, is that Angela Davis was framed by the federal government and had charges of conspiracy to commit murder. And of course, eventually she beat those charges and, she was freed. But while she was in prison, she was receiving letters from Palestinian women prisoners. I don't know how those were smuggled out and then smuggled in, but our people, we can make almost anything happen. You all know that we have political prisoners that have been able to have children, while locked up. So I assume when you think about that, getting a letter out and getting to the US is a much easier challenge. But we continue to learn from some of these folks, Mark Lamont Hill, Angela Davis, Melissa Alexander, and we continue to fight for, again, justice for all. On a related note, one of the resources that we have is this Together We Rise curriculum, and it's Palestine as a model of resistance. And, you know, some of the subjects that you can look at within this curriculum. So again, I want you to consider the US campaign a resource, not just our website, but of course our team members. But these are some of the subjects that you can find in depth there. You know, Palestine 101, so a basic framing of what we're dealing with as Palestinians on the ground. You know, understanding that it's settler colonialism that drives us from our homes there, settler colonialism that has allowed for the enacting of an apartheid system. But understanding those formations and those systems is pivotal to being able to advocate properly for justice in Palestine. Black Palestinian solidarity is something I'm deeply passionate about. As you heard in my introduction, I was fortunate enough to be a part of the founding of an organization called the Dream Defenders. And that's because for me as a Palestinian, when I heard about the story of Trayvon Martin, just like when I heard the story of so many young people, Black people, that were stolen from us, it really resonated on a deeper level, not just because of the discrimination and the injustice and the Jim Crow level apartheid, but the fact that there was never justice, right? Too many of us in here can go down a list of names of tragedies, and you know, we need to look no further than just yesterday, right? Tragedies in this country that have so far elicited no justice. And it's incumbent upon us who are truly dedicated to a vision of freedom and justice in Palestine to make sure that we bring that same energy right here in the United States. There's a lot of people whose livelihoods are dependent on it, including ours. You know, I think acknowledging that, you know, Zionism and white supremacy, you know, feed off of the same systems, and in fact, you know, frequently target the same communities means that we have to have an analysis that fights against white supremacy, that fights against Zionism, and helps people understand how those are intertwined. Palestine as a feminist issue is something that we're, you know, really proud of. A lot of the feminist work that's coming out of the Palestinian community the last couple of years. Shout out to the Palestinian Feminist Collective. I know we have some folks in the building that are representing, and you know, the makeup of this room says it, the makeup of the PAC staff says it. You know, the women in our community are, mashallah, doing amazing work, you know, not just in the local level here in PAC, but across the nation. And so we want to make sure that, you know, we're able to support the feminist perspective in gaining liberation for Palestine. The global impact of Zionism is important because, you know, Zionism has touched so many communities in a negative and profound manner, not just the Palestinian people. Shout out to our Lebanese family members, right? Because May 25th was a big day for the Lebanese people in getting the Israeli forces out of southern Lebanon. We need to celebrate that. And we need to understand again that it's not just the Palestinian people who are impacted by Zionism, although we are suffering the greatest of impact. This should connect us to other struggles. So advocating for change. Here are some of the, you know, the items that, again, like to throw our support behind and offer it as US campaign: training webinars, lobby visit reports, skills sharing, strategy sessions, in-district meetings, and town hall mobilizations. And, you know, this event is a wonderful opportunity for us to build with PAC, but I hope it's not the last, and I don't think it will be. So I think we can envision a lot more good trouble that we can get into together. So a couple more thoughts on advocating for change here that I'm going to talk through. All politics is local. This is a phrase that's utilized in US politics for quite some time. And really what it boils down to is that a politician's success is directly tied to his ability to understand and influence the issues of his constituents or her constituents, right? So what that means is these folks get elected to go to Congress and they have a mandate, and that mandate is to serve you, every single one of you in this room. You have power to hold elected officials accountable. Now, what we need to do is get better at how to do that. We need to get better at leveraging the grassroots power that we built into political impact, political power. So a couple of examples of what locally can be done or should be done. Mike mentioned BDS, and I'll talk about BDS in a second. I have some notes from Ahmad that have been really impactful for me as far as understanding BDS. but also there's these anti-BDS laws. Does New Jersey have an anti-BDS law? We do? Okay, so we should understand, one, when those policies are in place, but two, how do they impact us? Sometimes there's no direct impact because sometimes these anti-BDS laws have a lot to do with state funds going to different contractors. And if there's no contractor who's a supporter of BDS, you sometimes don't see this issue come up. But I can tell you that right now in Texas, that issue is going to come up because there who has contracts with the state of Texas, who is not willing to sign the pledge that the state of Texas was passing around, stating that they would not boycott Israel. And so there will be a court case that we're going to witness out of Texas. And I can't tell you when because the court system moves at its own pace. But it's important for us to have an ear and an eye on those things because these are unconstitutional barriers to our advocacy. We know from the civil rights movement's history that boycotts helped Black folks in the South topple Jim Crow, right? People were not allowed to sit at certain countertops. They were not allowed to sit on certain buses or certain seats on the buses, and therefore they boycotted. And the states of the South were really angry. They enacted violence upon the Black community in response. But eventually the right to boycott was upheld, and you started to see some of those victories in the civil rights movement. So as Mike alluded to, BDS, we've been achieving a lot of victories, and I consider Ben and Jerry's to be perhaps the biggest, and I'll talk about that in a little more in a second. The second local example is educational curriculum. How many of you have heard about the different definitions of anti-Semitism that incorporate anti-Zionism? You all heard about some of these things? They're attempting to pass some of these definitions on college campuses in local communities so they can stifle our free speech. And this is, of course, impacting like folks at the high school, middle school, and elementary school levels as well. And so this is important for us to understand because when you say all politics is local, it's not really just tied to these elected officials in Washington. It's tied to the local city council, the local school board, the local mayor. Literally every single one of these bodies touches on Palestine because of the many issues that we're discussing here today. So maybe normally we wouldn't have to worry about what an elementary school is teaching around anti-Semitism. But you know what we do on twofold. One, as advocates for racial justice and advocates for justice, we of course are intolerant of anti-Semitism. We reject anti-Semitism. It is an ugly stain on humanity. But we need that to be true anti-Semitism that we're fighting against, not just anti-Zionism. And some of these definitions, like the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, incorporate critiques of the state of Israel's existence, so critique of Zionism, as examples of anti-Semitism. So what that's really doing is attempting to, again, stifle the debate. It's attempting for us to not be able to tell our truth, that Zionism and colonialism on our lands is what drove us out of our homes. It is what continues to aid in the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. It is aiding in the apartheid structure, and it's the reason that we have Palestinians in refugee camps all over the world unable to return home. So these educational curriculums on the local level are incredibly important. Ending police exchange programs is another one. There's a program that Jewish Voice for Peace has run called the Deadly Exchange Program. And it makes note of the fact that US police forces, who by the way, have been violent and have committed atrocities here in the United States for decades, if not centuries, they didn't need to learn from Israeli military apparatus how to treat minorities. However, every American should be concerned that an illegal occupying power that we understand has committed war crimes should not be teaching police forces anything. And so this should concern Americans in every locale where police forces are being trained by Israeli military. A couple of examples that I can highlight for you is that in Ferguson and St. Louis, those police forces were trained in Israel. And we saw in 2014, gas canisters being shot at people, rubber-coated steel bullets being shot at people. We saw tanks and militarized vehicles running right down the main roads in Ferguson and St. Louis. And again, U.S. police forces have their issues that need to be dealt with. There's a lot of movements that can tell us a lot about the injustice that folks have faced here based on policing. But if we already know there's issues with policing, we can't let it get worse. And so our police force is being trained by, again, a illegal occupying power is incredibly problematic. And I'll shout out Durham, North Carolina. If you all are interested in being in contact with those organizers, they led a local campaign and they demanded of their city, Durham, North Carolina, to divest from all of these practices. And so Durham will not have any exchange programs with Israeli military and police. And that is a testament to the local organizing of those folks in Durham. So let's talk a little bit about BDS. BDS has offered us an opportunity to use a language that Americans understand, right? We just talked about the civil rights movement and how important boycott was, how important nonviolence is to the civil rights movement in this country. And so we have BDS as a model for what many folks can participate in. And Mike referenced Ben & Jerry's. I'm going to use Ben & Jerry's as the example as I talk about these 4 critical factors here. So the first most important critical factor when assessing whether to launch a BDS campaign is the level of complicity. So if Ben & Jerry's was not selling ice cream in illegal Israeli settlements, they would not have the level of complicity of an actor that is directly benefiting off of the occupation. But Ben & Jerry's was in fact selling ice cream in illegal Jewish-only settlements. So their level of complicity was there because we understood that Ben & Jerry's literally was profiting off of Jewish-only settlements, Jewish-only stores on stolen Palestinian land. So their level of complicity was up there. The intersectionality. See, if we look to target a company or a corporate actor, we need to understand their intersectionality of the risk it poses. So for instance, if Ben & Jerry's and their practices only impacted Palestinians, then it wouldn't really be a movement that we can get, masses behind. Intersectionality here alludes to the fact that, Ben & Jerry's for quite some time was modeling and marketing itself as the social justice brand of ice cream. They're literally one of the only corporate actors that, goes all in with social justice. So as far as intersectionality, it made sense that this would be a target because, Black folks fighting for justice in this country were being wooed by Ben & Jerry's so that Ben & Jerry's can, develop those relationships and support, Black folks struggling for justice here in the U.S. But without that intersectionality, without Ben & Jerry's having to be accountable to multiple communities, it really wouldn't work as a vital target. The third critical factor is media reach. There's corporate actors on the BDS list that none of us can name, right? They're just, random, corporations that, aren't really in everyday use. We don't know the name, we don't know the branding. And so if we were to launch a BDS campaign against those corporations, we may not get much, media visibility. And that's important because that's how we're able to communicate a lot of times with the masses. And the fourth is winnability. Look, there's, again, several items on the BDS list that we're not going to target right now with the campaign because it quite simply does not seem winnable in this moment. We have to be realistic with what goals we set, because we have movements that are looking to us for guidance and support and direction as to what campaigns that we go for. And so winnability is important. And I'll offer a brief example. I believe, and I could be mistaken, Hewlett-Packard is on the BDS list, right? You don't see huge BDS campaigns against Hewlett-Packard because almost every, laptop, around this laptop right here may have Hewlett-Packard in there. And so it doesn't make sense for us to boycott things that are going to eliminate our ability to do our job, right? I mean, I know the iPhone is problematic, right? And we can get there one day. If we build a strong enough movement, we can push Apple on their different practices, what they utilize to produce their phones. But winnability is important because we're on a 70+ year struggle for justice here, and our people have been looking for impact. And so those four factors are critical for any BDS campaign, and they're really important for any of us at the local level, at the national level, if we want to engage. So this is just some brief information on how to, stay connected with us, our Instagram, our Twitter, our Facebook, and our website. And of course, the website that I noted has all these resources. We'll pause now. I'd love to take any, questions, any feedback, and also, based on this presentation, you know, and your understanding of the U.S. campaign, if there's something that you think we should be doing, there's something you think we should be doing more of, if there's something we're completely messing up and shouldn't be doing at all, we'd love to hear it. So I'm not sure what sort of format I'm here. Maybe people can raise their hand. Okay,
Yeah.
great. So, okay, great. Let's do that. Perfect. First question. Yeah, we'll pass it so this way folks can hear the question.
Thank you and Mike both for the work that you do. And so as you were talking, I was thinking about, you know, my background and my work. So I'm a trauma therapist, and in the near future, I'll be embarking on doing research with Palestinian political prisoners. And so in general, I was thinking about advocacy and the work that you all do and kind of the movements and how to support well-being. And so how often are you seeing burnout, not only within yourselves, but through this? So therefore, we can maintain longevity. And because I think part of that experience in movement building is making sure our well-being is okay, to promote that. And so I think that's just a portion where my mind goes.
Yeah, it's such an important question. I think, like, first I'll say that a lot of times societal issues are replicated within institutions, right? Just like, you know, patriarchy is a big deal in society, you know, you'll see it. So we're struggling with, you know, how to implement, you know, this sort of like policy of, you know, constant support and offering alternatives or options or resources to our team. Mike can tell you that, you know, our team has struggled with burnout just like any other organization. We've tried to establish like a working committee of team members. So we have like a staff-led committee that like examines everything from like, you know, should we be messaging each other after hours? And if so, what does that look like? It's not lost on us that, you know, we hold an immense amount of trauma, not only as advocates doing this work, but also Palestinians who do this work who are very closely connected to it. And so a prime example was just recently when Shireen Abu Akleh was murdered. You know, unfortunately, we see so many members of our community murdered all the time, but that one really hit us hard. And I guess I want to do better at being able to hit pause for myself and for the team. But as someone who's, you know, invested in the field, we're all ears. So whatever you think we should be looking at, you know, we're willing to do. Mike, anything to add there? Okay, great. Thank you. Next question. Okay, great.
I actually have a few things I wanted to discuss. You know, you talked about the BDS and our tax dollars and how we're pretty much funding the suppression. I just want to say, when we discuss about our tax dollars, you know, it's not only funding the military, but we're also funding the actual investments in the settlements themselves. So when we are talking about BDS, are we going to go and publicly say this organization is literally investing in apartheid? Are we going to be able to take that level and go to court with these organizations? Is this a path that you see happening, that we can say, well, these are the facts, this report says it is undeniable, Israel's an apartheid, we are literally funding apartheid/terrorism ultimately? Is this something that we can go to court with and get these organizations out in the public and expose what they're actually funding?
That's a great question. So, you know, as Mike alluded to, we've been fighting a lawsuit. And so what that means is the other side has been utilizing the courts, right? They've been looking at legal remedies. We haven't seen anything yet. I'm actually an attorney. I haven't seen anything yet like that, but it's, I think, within the realm of possibilities. People have just started to expose those Zionist settler organizations because many of them have nonprofit status.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that folks are looking into. Maybe not, you know, getting them, you know,
Completely, but
yeah,
at least taking away that.
exactly, maybe taking away the nonprofit status. So that is an avenue I think that I see as a possibility. Also, this makes me think about the fact that, you know, the EU, the European Union, you know, made a decision a few years ago to start labeling certain products, right? Products of the West Bank product. And that was important.
Canada just did that as well. Canada said that labeling anything that comes from the settlements as Israeli product is against their policies. I think Canada is now finally going that route.
And I think they're doing that because of potential legal risks, right?
Yeah.
And so I think you're spot on that that's a trajectory.
Also about the grassroots.
I'm sorry, Mike.
So I just thought of one thing to say too. Have you all heard about Sierra Club and the recent news around Sierra Club?
Yeah.
I think that's another example where they have a brand, right? Environmental movement. And so even though we lost on that, they backtracked, right? They stopped the trips. I was amazed they stopped the trips. Like, we were part of a big coalition of folks working on that. And I think it was a testament to all the work to get us here that they actually, for 3 days took the trips down. Obviously we want real wins, but there was a lot of conversations that went into that. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal. And obviously there's pressure brought to bear after that and they backtrack. But I think with targeting organizations like that too, that have such a big brand in, that quote unquote don't have anything to do with Palestine, right?
But especially if they say, oh, we're advocating for, climate or whatever, we
Right.
say, well, if you are, then this is happening.
Right. And so there are other opportunities there that I think we should exploit and look for.
I also want to talk about the grassroots movement that you're saying that you want to connect with other grassroots movements. I've worked with Sean King and his grassroots movement, and I think that it is such a close tie to what's happening with the Palestinian people. I think that's a great direction to go, and he's definitely 100% with it. So that's the beautiful thing. He was so outspoken when everything happened with Shadeen. And, unfortunately, so many more crises happened that it kind of got pushed out of the queue. So it's nice to connect with people that are already on our side.
Absolutely.
I also wanted to ask, sorry.
No, take your time. This is great.
And Mark Hill,
Yep.
he has a new film, Black in the Holy Land. Is this something that you guys are going to start endorsing, helping him kind of spread this information? Because I think it's huge. Because again, everybody wants to paint things out. Oh, well, the Palestinian struggle is a Muslim-Jewish struggle, but then you see what happened with Shadeen. She's neither one. So we need to connect that community and say this isn't about religion. This is literally just about colonialism. They don't care what Palestinian you are. They're just Palestinian.
Yep. So I love Mark Hill. He's my brother, a really dear friend. I took him to Palestine for his first time in 2015. And I'm actually in Black in the Holy Land. I was there at the same trip one time. And he was like, sit down, I got to interview you. So we will, I think, I'm actually just a big fan of art and film as a medium. I think we gain so many more hearts and minds through art.
You heard about Netflix?
Yep.
That was incredible. I think that was a great move for us.
So just on the Netflix tip, before I get back to Black in the Holy Land, yesterday I got a chance at the IMU Gala to hear from Mo Amer, who's going to have his own show and series on Netflix. And so that's something very exciting for us. Mark's documentary is really important because Black in the Holy Land is going to tell the story of the experiences of all the different Black folks that call Palestine homeland. So, the Afro-Palestinian community, right? We work really closely with that community in East Jerusalem and in Jericho. But also you have the Hebrew Israelites, right? A Black community that predominantly came from the city of Chicago and started this community in Israel. And Ethiopian Jews, right? And this is important, right? Because it's not the exact same struggle, but the Black community members within Israel will tell you of the many different instances of racial discrimination, of xenophobia. I mean, folks like David Sheen have also done a lot of research for years documenting the abuse that folks have had. So I say all that to say that absolutely really invested in that. And when Mark and his crew are ready with the film, we're certainly going to look to be a partner. I'll add just last thing because it's related. In those delegations that I led with Dream Defenders, I have amazing footage from Mark and Aja Monet, Philip Agnew, Vic Mensa, a lot of these folks that I took over the years. And what I'm doing, I'm directing and producing the film as well. It's called Shukran, 10 Days in Palestine. That's a working title. We may change it. But the actual story is going to be the history of Black delegations to Palestine. Because what happened was in 2015, when Dream Defenders started these delegations, a lot of folks in this generation had never seen Black Palestinian solidarity on that level. So they started thinking that Dream Defenders was a part of the creation of that solidarity. I want this film to be able to empower people to know the history that back in the days, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, while looking for justice for Black Americans in the South, where Blacks weren't even allowed to register to vote, they were also concerned about Palestine. I want folks to know that the Black Panther Party, in the middle of defending their neighborhoods in the US, was also concerned about Palestine. Angela Davis, I want her to tell that story of her connection to the Palestinian women prisoners, so that folks can know that we're grounded in a rich, deep history of struggle together.
I sometimes, when I'm doing my social media advocacy, I always tell people that we need to pretty much flood the film festivals with Palestinian content. We need to let not only the world know the truth, we need to let Israelis know the truth is getting out there. Your propaganda pumping, it's just gonna get weaker. So I feel like
Absolutely.
I want people to think of it as it's either, jump ship or go down with it. I want people to know this is a sinking ship.
I like that.
Yeah.
Put it on a t-shirt.
Yeah, you should. I also wanted to talk about how you brought up Apple and the devices that we use.
Yep.
Apple is actually going to be suing the NGO that created Pegasus.
Oh, great.
So they have a lawsuit happening now, and I felt like instead of going after them for the material, why don't we support them in doing that? We can all talk to them, advocate with them, and tell them, hey, we support this because as people who are putting themselves on the line pretty much to speak about Palestine, because we all know the Israeli lobby loves to target people, loves to go after you, name you, shame you, everything. So I wanted to be like, have some sort of thank you, you know what I mean, to Apple, and to tell people this is not conspiracy, Pegasus is real, it's a non-click form of hacking, you don't have to do anything, they get in there.
And that could be used to pressure other phone makers, right? So what is Samsung doing? If, are they not concerned with Israeli spyware on their phones? Absolutely.
Yeah, so, and last thing is, a lot of people confuse political Zionism with Zionism and Judaism.
Sure.
Are we going to focus on teaching people the difference? Because I feel like when somebody says, oh, you're anti-Zionist, then you're anti-Semitic, you hate
Sure.
Jewish people. I feel like once we start to clear these talking points, I think we're gonna get a lot more people on our side, because the second people say, oh, you're anti-Zionist, that means you hate all the Jewish people, you want to destroy Israel, and then we try to tell people, like, how do you expect, like, the two-state solution, I feel, is garbage, it's just not gonna work.
Hello.
You can't live with your oppressor, it's just garbage. And I really feel the only way is to end the apartheid system, create an entire new system. The people who are believing in the supremacy, they have to be held accountable. There is no justice without accountability.
That's right.
And if people want to take the course of, do you really want peace or do you want quiet from the Palestinian people? Because if you're saying you want peace, you're acknowledging something is wrong. And who's creating this wrong thing? It's not the people struggling to be free, people who are present. So I feel that we really need to teach people the true definitions of what's happening.
Let me ask you a question now. Are you a PAC member?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Clearly you've been through the courses, huh? No, this is great. This is a testament to the work you all do. I agree with you 100%. And that's why I brought up those definitions of anti-Semitism that are making their way. I can tell you that the university that I attended, Florida State University, recently had an issue about 1.5 to 2 years ago where a young really dynamic Palestinian American leader, Ahmad, was Senate president on campus. Really inspiring kid. I mean, I wished I could have been like him when I was in college. And he was targeted and attacked because he had wrote a paper in high school, essentially comparing the Holocaust, the contemporary, to what was happening in Palestine. And, that is one of the examples within the IHRA definition. If you oppose the existence of the state of Israel, if you compare, the actions of the Israeli government and the Nazis, it's like all these things that are absolutely have nothing to do with fighting real, true anti-Semitism. So I agree with you. There's a lot of education to do there.
Definitely. Two more things, sorry. So I just found out, especially about what happened in Texas. The representative Harry Kuhler, he was endorsed by AIPAC, and he's NRA backed. He is 100% for supporting the Israeli government. So I really want to figure out how can we expose all of the control that Israel has on our politicians.
Yep.
I mean, they have their thumb on Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter what party you're a part of, they're in there.
That's right. So that's twofold, and neither one is easy. The first aspect of that is really delegitimizing the AIPACs and the liberal Zionist organizations. organizations. What we found is that we've been able to push some progressive members of Congress away from AIPAC. The problem is when they leave AIPAC, they go to J Street. And J Street is a typical liberal Zionist problematic institution because for them, the occupation is a problem. It's uncomfortable. It's not nice, but they're also not willing to go as far as saying, let's cut Israeli aid until they treat Palestinians like human beings. And so then that's part of it, is delegitimizing the Zionist organizations. And then it's us building up the capacity to fill the void, right? So how many C4 organizations out there that exist that advocate on Palestine? I can name 2, Jewish Voice for Peace, American Muslims for Palestine. We'd like to get a C4 running, but it's not just about C4s, right? It's like about creating a stable, consistent vehicle of advocacy for taxpayers to all these members of Congress. And that's what AIPAC's actually done. If it's not about the conference where everyone comes and speaks, what happens is when they leave those AIPAC conferences, they end up on like a state-by-state delegation and then a district-by-district delegation. And they go in groups of 20, 25, 30 people to each congressional office. And that day, members of Congress hear nothing but how important it is to support the state of Israel. So I commend American Muslims for Palestine. I believe that the last couple of years, they've had an advocacy day that's gotten more and more Muslims and Palestinians and Palestinian advocates out there, but we can do more. So that's the twofold: delegitimizing the Zionist orgs that are doing it and filling that void with a pro-Palestine, justice-centered advocacy.
Perfect. And I like the last point you brought up, because I feel that when something happens, we write to our representatives, and they're expecting an influx. They're like, okay, this happened. We know there's been a huge inflow of letters.
That's right.
You know, I feel like, why aren't we actually going to town hall meetings and speaking to our representatives directly? You know, it doesn't even have to be that many people, because it could be 2 people consistently. You know, each person gets 5 minutes. You pick 2, 3 topics that you say, this is what I want. Like, are you supporting the RH 2590? Like,
Yep.
this, like, at least can we agree that children have the right to be free and safe? I feel like, you know, we could do so much more when we are in their face.
Absolutely. And see, that advocacy doesn't have to only happen in DC, because they have in-district offices, right? So like, what would it look like if we said we're going to occupy your in-district office? Like, this is something we did at Dream Defenders. When Trayvon Martin was killed and Governor Rick Scott refused to look at stand your ground laws, what we did is we said, okay, we're going to conduct a sit-in. And we stayed literally on the, you know, you can Google this, and 30 days and 30 nights. Now, we didn't achieve our objective because you all know from afar, Florida is really bad, right? Like, Florida's messed up. We have,
Different world.
it's a whole different world. But what would it look like if, you know, the next time there was an onslaught on Gaza, or the next time people were about to be kicked out of their homes in Sheikh Jarrah, so when, or Masafir Yatta right now, what would happen if, you know, the local representative had 20 people sitting there unwilling to leave that office until he engaged with them on the issue? And what if we kept coming back day after day after day after day? There's a lot of power. There's a lot of power in that possibility.
Can I just add one quick thing? Another thing that I think we've had success on, I mean, we have this kind of ascended progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and our work and the work of others is trying to make it, trying to end the exception to no longer be progressive except for Palestine. And like, you know, that's obviously a small wing of the Democratic Party, but we're having success, again, because it's intersectional work that Ahmad spoke some about. People in other movements have seen us stand up for their struggles, and they're starting to stand up for Palestine more. So I think that that's, I mean, you should go to all of the district offices, as Ahmed was saying, but especially those progressive members who've not spoken out about Palestine or not spoken out enough. We need to pressure them, because they're sort of they're going to be the first to flip, and that's going to build more momentum. And we've seen some success in that. We need to keep building, not enough, but we've seen some success.
I want to say about before I mentioned the Dream Defenders clip, I use the Vimeo clip all the time in my classes. I love that clip. So if anyone is used to looking at it. I also heard about Black Women like a couple of years ago from Nancy.
Yep.
But I'm excited. I want to plug that we should do a joint phone discussion.
I would love that.
And
I would love that.
yeah, discussion for it would be awesome. We have a question on Facebook, but I'm going to take it after your question. Go ahead.
I like your t-shirt.
Thank you. So, hi. I was based in Gaza for 5 years. I was working at Gaza Sky Geeks, a tech hub based in Gaza. I was running a coding school there. And I moved back to the States about a year ago. So I was there in May last year. And now I'm a writer. I'm writing essays and a book on my experience in Gaza. And something I wanted to just offer, which will turn into a question, is that something that I think that was an interesting success about Gaza Sky Geeks was building a community of, they were mentors, basically people who wanted to come and teach in Gaza, and they were people from all around the world, usually in the tech industry. And they were people who we were able to bring into Gaza, and they got to see it firsthand, and it was through a very human lens of just teaching and exchanging knowledge. And that it was a very vibrant network. And I think what was interesting was that in May, that network came alive in a way it had never come alive before, because everyone was like, this is wrong for me in a way that it would, it's wrong because I know now. I know, like I've seen it. And I know I have names and faces of people there. And it was powerful because those would be people who might work at Google, and they would say, I sent this letter out, right, in my organization or something like that. And I think there's some power in sort of going beyond the usual suspects, right, Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, because that's how it will slowly become a voter issue. And so I'm curious about how that could extend into advocacy. How, like, I think that sort of element of community building where it's that anyone from any background, any industry has a role to play. And maybe it's just volunteering and giving, or just a chance to think or experience Palestine or know a Palestinian. And so I'm just wondering, do you have any thoughts around kind of like what are those steps around community building that goes beyond the echo chambers and the people who know?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and there's no easy response to it. But what I'll start with saying is that we have to be organized, like organize. And what that means is usually we're tied to an organizing body. So like individually, we can contribute, but you are a part of a collective in us, and that's why you all had an impact and a power and a network that can continue to exist. And so each of us, we just need to figure out what that institution is for us to join. Is it PAC? Is it US Campaign? Is it Artists for Palestine? Or is it, what was the name of the tech?
Gaza Sky Geeks.
Yeah, Gaza Sky Geeks. I mean, like literally every single one of us has to figure out how our skill set can be adapted into our advocacy. So last example I'll use is last night again, I was at the IMU Gala, and Mo Ammer was talking about his series. Now, Mo isn't the guy that is gonna post like me, I'll post everything. Like someone got hurt, someone's home, I'm sharing everything. Mo Ammer is the type of guy who is gonna sit there and like produce a series where in the beginning it doesn't look like super, hardcore pro-Palestine, but by the end of the season, this is what I hear, and I can't wait to see his new series. It's gonna clarify a lot of the arguments. It's gonna affirm and reinforce a lot of the arguments. And so you mentioned tech. I think tech is huge. And we've seen similar advocacy and interest in tech in low-income communities in the US, where like you see folks like struggling with all these different opportunities. One of the important things is to establish these impact tech hubs. So I think we're incredibly thankful that the youth of Gaza had that opportunity. And hopefully folks can find that example inspiring for them to find how they're going to contribute in their role into aiding in this movement.
The other thing I'd add is it's in the example you gave, and thank you for being there. I've heard of that work from afar, and I've always been impressed. So that's awesome that you were there. But I think it's getting people to Palestine, right? Like for those of you for whom it's home, I know it's hard to visit, and I know the border can be awful. I've been there with folks as a non-Palestinian trying to support them. And whether it's church trips or know your heritage trips, like getting people there, that forms that visceral connection, like what you were talking about in May when the network, as you described it, was activated. So that's actually how I first met Ahmad, working together on a delegation. And I obviously sent a lot of delegations. Veer mentioned my bio with Eyewitness Palestine, but there's a responsible travel call that Palestinians in Palestine put out. And so there are trips that you can encourage people to go on that do travel there responsibly to meet, because that, if you're able to do that, if you're able to spend the time to go there, it makes a huge difference. So if you're Palestinian, helping get family members there, giving them the confidence to deal with the border crossing and connecting with people who sort of know how to do that. I know and understand it's very hard and fraught. And for non-Palestinians, encouraging your friends to go there and actually see it, that adds a depth, people who came off those trips were just like, I can't unsee what I've seen, right? That makes lifelong advocates. So that's a piece too, I think.
Yeah, just on that note, is like my experience with delegations are not only what they see, but the relationships they build. So I'm guessing there's some people in Gaza you're going to be connected to, for the rest of your life. And that for my delegates has meant, everything. Like the fact that there are kids in the refugee camps in Bethlehem that they've developed strong relationships with. Actually, Muhammad al-Kurd, who's a friend, and we're all, I think, big supporters and fans of Muhammad al-Kurd. But Muhammad al-Kurd first met Aja Monet, who I took on a delegation. She's a renowned poet. I took her on a delegation in 2015, and we met with Muhammad in front of his home. He was just a young boy, and Aja ended up writing the foreword for his book. She ended up supporting him through writing his book, and now they have this beautiful transcendent relationship. And for me, that's it's just the power of people and relationships and community. And no matter how many borders they build, or how many apartheid walls, or how many fences, or how many soldiers they put on the checkpoints with guns, love shatters that stuff, and movement shatters that stuff. So hopefully we have a lot more to contribute there.
So we have a question on Facebook I'm going to just ask. The question was, did the overwhelming support to Ukraine from all of corporate America and media open doors for you in terms of allowing the Palestinian narrative to be openly shared in American companies and media?
Yes and no. The answer is yes, because it provides an opening for the argument, right? I mean, we all saw that all of a sudden armed resistance, Molotov cocktails, like grandmas defending their homes with Molotov cocktails against evil Russian soldiers. We saw how acceptable this was. Actually, we saw how many people were eager to champion that. So there's an opening for the argument. The distinction is that right now, the liberation of Palestine does not serve empire. And so that's why you see this distinction with Ukraine, is that US empire and imperialism is at odds with Russian imperialism. And so, they're bumping heads because, I guess all these gangs want to control the world and control how we all live and who sets what borders. So we're not going to see the same reaction that we've seen for Ukraine, that we've been demanding for Palestine, but that doesn't mean that our argument, our cause is any less righteous. And in fact, I think Ukraine, for me, it definitely just presents more opportunities for that conversation.
And one quick opportunity I'd love to see us make more use of. I think I've seen a few articles on this, but there's a real difference in the way boycott's being talked about in terms of like how the BNC has been so meticulous over the years. And Ahmad went through some of the criteria in terms of complicity, involvement in the territories. And now there are just these blanket boycotts of all Russians, like at sporting events and stuff like that. This is visceral reaction, like, hey, this is something we can do. And I think we could exploit more fully, like how kind of short-sighted that is and how that is, they are picking on Russians for being Russians. And whereas the BDS guidelines are looking at institutions that are complicit. And with so much misinformation about, BDS in support of the Palestinian cause, and I would like to see us use that a little bit more. Because, and really a testament to the BNC, to the work of the Boycott National Committee and their work over the years to be that meticulous, to make those distinctions.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
All right, take it easy on me, Dan, please. We're friends. Yeah.
Welcome to PAC. My question is about the lawsuit that Uscpr faced. How did it affect you, and did you get any help from any other organization to pay for defending yourself in this lawsuit? And also, because you guys had mentioned the low fare, which is there's a lot, lawsuit is one of the mechanisms that the other side uses to scare or stop the growth of Palestinian or organizations that work in Palestine. How do you think, what suggestions you have for us to try to protect ourselves from future lawsuits?
Yeah, these are really great questions. So Mike can talk a little bit about what it was like when the organization got sued, because I was brought on in the middle, but he can tell you a little bit about the experience of what it was like for the team receiving that lawsuit. I will say we were intensely supported by, movement partners all across the spectrum. In addition to folks like, reaching out and offering support, we had lawyers from Center for Constitutional Rights. CCR is really, I think, a leader when it comes to progressive politics and applying those to the legal field. CCR is really well known for defending a lot of the folks that were held up in Guantanamo. So they're really a trusted agent when we think about our sort of politics. And we also, just like any nonprofit, our board has to have insurance. It's called directors and
Office.
Yeah, directors and officers insurance. And usually when you have this insurance, there's an insurance. When you have this insurance, there's a legal defense mechanism that kicks in if you're sued. And so we were fortunate enough to, have that allow for us to get legal counsel. But really, I think the legal counsel that has meant the world to us has been Center for Constitutional Rights, because not only do they understand the law and the fact that this was a meritless lawsuit, but they understood our politics and our movement. So this was really important, because when you're in the middle of a lawsuit and people are alleging that, for instance, the allegations were that we actually contributed to armed, resistance against Israel with the Great March of Return. The allegation was also that we had ties to these organizations because we had a relationship to the BNC. So when you have a lawsuit that places you in that sort of position, many organizations are scared to do work. Many organizations get scared to make certain statements. They get scared to have certain partnerships. We had to go through a process of really just making sure that we had those legal advocates affirming our politics and our programs and the work that we need to do, but also let us know little things like, hey, don't delete your emails. Those things, if God forbid you needed to go to discovery, if this lawsuit proceeded, you're going to need all that information. And so having great legal support was really pivotal for us. The question around what we can do and what you all can prepare to do, that's actually a question I'd love to invite PAC to be a part of. So we've been struggling with just dealing with the lawsuit, but in conversations with Palestine Legal, in conversations with AROC from the Bay Area, this is something that we actually want to go on the offensive with. And so, sister, you were talking, your name, please? Dania? You mentioned, for instance, like what can we do with these organizations as far as the courts? This applies to the lawfare question too, because we're tired of being on the defensive, right? We don't want to just defend lawsuits when they come at us. We don't want to just have to respond. We want to figure out what it means to go on the offensive. So any thoughts that, we can collectively contribute, I think will aid the movement wide. In the meantime, I'll just say that, you should recognize that your political speech is protected. Your right to boycott is protected. And these anti-BDS laws will get struck down when these courts, receive these cases. But we are really thinking hard along with partners around what the offensive strategy could look like. Is it suing these settler organizations? Is it asking for them to lose their nonprofit status? We haven't settled, but we'd love to think with PAC and others around that. Mike, you want to answer a little bit what it was like?
I can. Yeah, I don't have a bunch to add to that. I mean, I think Ahmed hit all the major notes. It was the whole goal of this, we think, is to silence, right? To get the fear level such that, as an individual, you're afraid to speak up, on your campus, you're afraid to speak up, or as an organization, you're afraid to be in partnership with people. And so I think we were relatively fortunate. What Ahmed described, people immediately stood up, Palestine Legal, Center for Constitutional Rights, Jewish Voice for Peace, were calling us, what can we do? How can we support you? Donors were very generous. People were not afraid in this instance, and that was a huge benefit to helping us not be afraid. And as a relatively mid-sized organization with national reach, that was great to have that support. But I think of individuals, right? Like if you're at your college campus, how easy would it be to silence you, to impose fear on you? And so I think we all need to get better. We need to go on the offense, to Ahmed's point, and we need to support each other. Like Palestine Legal, has an intake system. For instance, if you are an individual facing repression efforts on your campus, wherever, they're a great resource for our movement, and we need, strength in numbers. That was key for us, even as a bigger organization, and it was a scary time to think about the nature of the lawsuit. I mean, reading the allegations, it's clear these things, they're like overreach, and these are no basis in fact. But but it's still scary because you never know what the court system is going to do. So having that solidarity of other orgs is hugely important. And for individuals, I think we need to do that too, to better protect them, to better fight the effort to silence people.
So I want to be conscious of everyone's time. There's one more question, and then we'll make this last question.
Yeah, man, I thought we were friends. What's going on? That's
Your
fucking
friends
please.
are messy.
Yeah, no, fuck up, please.
We don't get to have you here.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much.
What would you say is the biggest challenge that faces your organization in your work? And a follow-up to this is, how do you see your relationship with PAC, and how can PAC help and what you guys do?
Yeah, I think,
Last question.
yeah, the last question is lit. You know, what I would say is we struggle, one of the things we struggle with is the difference, and I was sharing this a bit with Abiyad and Rania earlier, is, you know, the rapid response versus the consistent programming and campaigns. So, for instance, PAC has these wonderful programs that you all operate. And then also when something happens, we all like running around, like what can we do? Like in a moment where Gaza is being bombed, where people are being pushed out of their homes, in Masaf Riyadh or Sheikh Jarrah or Silwan or Shireen Abu Akleh is murdered, we're all scrambling to figure out what the response is, because we know that in those moments there is a need for rapid response. And it's really difficult for an organization to manage the rapid response moments with the consistent programming, because you're dealing with folks that are, you know, to your point, right, traumatized, fatigued, dealing with burnout, but have jobs to do. So that's one of the big challenges. And the other big challenge, Diab, I think we need like a movement-wide analysis of, you know, where our strengths and weaknesses are. You know, who's filling what gaps, who's plugging what holes, who's fulfilling what objectives, and what's still missing. You know, like Palestine Legal did that. They thought about it, they're like, you know what, there needs to be, with BDS and other, there needs to be a legal advocacy organization specifically dedicated for Palestine, and Palestine Legal was born. I'm sure you all did the same when you founded PAC. You recognized there was a need locally to fulfill programming, to educate community, to instill a sense of pride, and you did that. We need to do that on a national level. So like, what is it that the US campaign, AMP, JVP, all these national orgs are each bringing to the table, and how do we not reinvent the wheel? So how does each of them say, like, this is what we're bringing to the table? And then how do we name what's missing and create that? So those are the two, you know, the juggling between rapid response and consistent programming. And then, you know, what are we doing movement-wide? Who's got what? You know, who's holding what role? Who's holding what skill set? And that's incredibly impactful. So those are the two things that are keeping me up at night a bit. The last question is simple. Anything PAC wants to do, sign us up. I mean, so I was here, we came in town for the IMU Gala to take some meetings, but like immediately Mike said, I think we should reach out to PAC. And I loved it because you all know I have a relationship with PAC. And so as soon as he mentioned it, I was like, sold, let's do it. I really meant what I said earlier about, you know, examples like PAC being pivotal to what we need to imagine nationwide. And so a couple ideas already came up tonight, you know, a film screening and talk back. We're down for that. I know that there's some really great books that are coming out. If we can support any of that, we're down for that. One thing me and Mike were just sharing on the side here is a situation like this where we can just hear from you all around like what work you're interested in doing locally, but what you think the US campaign should be doing. That for us is something that's incredibly important as well. Again, we're at the national level and our work does not exist. It does not have any power, it does not have any leverage, it does not have any impact without organizations and local advocacy efforts like PAC. So with that being said, you know, we're down. I can't wait to work with you more closely and consider the US campaign a resource. Anything to add to that, Mike? No. Great. All right, thank you very much. I know you all are gonna help.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, please
Yeah,
help
we are
yourself
on
to
camera,
get
please.
lunch and that. We have some dessert also. I just want to thank both of you for coming and for everything. Sure, we love the US campaign for Palestinian rights just as much as you love working with us, and so we're excited to keep this going.
All right.
Thanks
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Have a great night.